Welcome to the Learning for Legacy show with me, your host, Afam Onyenakala. This is all about the concept of making generational wealth understandable, practical, and accessible. I'll be exploring a range of topics and sharing conversations, interviews, and more. Because what good is building wealth if we don't build the people? Hello, it's your host, welcoming you into the second full week of January 2022. If you've enjoyed the content on the show, please leave a review or alternatively like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if that's your preferred platform. Have you got a story? Have you got a topic suggestion for the show? Let me know in the review or the comment section with hashtag LFL. I will choose one of those and I will give you a shout out on an episode if you would like. Now, at the start of this new year, one of the things that we pretty much all want to do is to get cash flowing towards us. Now, that's not just for us, but to be a blessing to our families, for our loved ones, and for those causes that we care about. So what I'd like to do on this first solo episode of 2022 is to do a brief recap on how cash flows. Now, I'm going to look at this in two different ways, really, because when we think of cash flow, it can either work one of two ways. This could be cash flowing towards us or cash flowing away from us. Now, most people would like to have cash flowing towards them. So what I'm going to touch on are two different mindsets that affect that. Now, for cash to flow towards us, that is effectively adopting a producer's mentality. And whenever we have cash leaving us, that's effectively as a result of a consumer's mentality. So for 2022 in particular, I would encourage all of us to pivot our mindset towards a producer's mentality, more so than that of a consumer's mentality. Because obviously we need to purchase things, we need to consume to live, to function in our societies and our communities. But in order for cash to flow further and quicker and better in the direction towards us, we must adopt a producer's mentality. So if we look at that and try to identify how does cash work, one of the first questions we can ask ourselves is what type of money do we make, and what would we like to be making for this upcoming year? Now, when we look at the money that we're currently making, we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions, such as how long is it taking to make that money? How much does it effectively cost in order to make that money that we acquire? And finally, what are the various tax implications of the types of money that we earn? Now, many people are familiar with Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, and this has been talked about and described in a number of different ways throughout the years. And this effectively breaks things down into four ways. So this is all about cash flowing to us in four different ways. And what we can all do, at this first month of this brand new year is to assess where we are in our lives in these four different areas, and then make a decision on how we would like to pivot to either focus more on an area that's working for us or to look at another area that we would like to move into. And again, as I've said in previous episodes, it doesn't matter where you're starting from, what your position is. Everybody has to start from somewhere. So part of what we need to do here also is just begin to focus and establish the fact that we are all running our own lanes. So we're not in competition with the person to our left or the person to our right. We are in our own lane, we have our own targets, and we are on a journey together to get there. So if we look at this again, how does cash flow to us in these four ways? Now, the cash flow quadrant can be broken down into these four ways, these four sections: the employee, the self-employed, the business owner, and the investor. And with this, we simply need to determine where we want to sit in each of these quadrants. So, for example, the first one, the employee. As an employee, when you're working, often perks are often included. They tend to be long hours. Significantly, this tends to fit within a 40 to 50% tax bracket, generally speaking. And often, as we work as an employee, the first 5 months, effectively, of our salary is effectively paying the government. So, in this quadrant, in many ways, you have a lot less flexibility in terms of the earning potential that you have. Now, if we look at the second quadrant, this is the quadrant of the self-employed. Now, within this quadrant, there are a lot more cost in terms of making things. The hours that we work tend to be a lot longer. And we are still trading time for money, but often with no perks. So in essence, we may have a business in this quadrant, but basically we have effectively put ourselves in our own job. So in this quadrant also, the gross income that we earn is often personal and is taxed at the highest rate. The third quadrant is that of the business owner. And as a business owner, you have certain protections via limited liability. And the benefit of being a business owner is that you can create a business system with no personal risk under limited liability. And the taxes can often be lower, i.e. through taking dividend drawings. And you can buy and sell as a business owner without taking a personal risk within the correct legal structure. Now, the fourth quadrant is that of an investor. Now, as an investor, you have various tax-free investment opportunities. And what happens with many investors is that the way the structure is set up, it's possible to enjoy various tax loopholes as well, as sanctioned by the government. You often have a lot more time and money freedom because you're essentially earning interest from assets. You generate interest from various investments, and many of the investment opportunities that may come your way are often tax-free. And through this, you will tend to find that those who earn the least, i.e. in the employee bracket or the self-employed bracket, end up paying the most in taxes. And as unfortunate as that sounds, that's currently the way it is. But you find that those who are business owners and ultimately investors pay the least in those taxes and get to enjoy a lot more of the money that they have earned. So with this cash flow quadrant, as Robert Kiyosaki structured it, you have the employee quadrant and the self-employed quadrant on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you have the final two quadrants, that of the business owner and that of the investor. And one of the challenges, and also an area that we can aspire towards, is to pivot from being on the left-hand side of those quadrants towards that on the right hand side. So making the transition from an employee in the self-employed to ultimately a business owner and an investor. And there are many different ways of doing that. But in terms of this first month, one of the things that we can do is take an inventory of where we are currently at the moment, and then decide where we would like to be. And that step sometimes is often the hardest step, because once we actually establish where we are and compare that to where we want to be, there may be a large gap in between. There may be various obstacles in between. And that may seem scary, but it's okay. The most important thing is to make the decision. Where do you want to be? And then after that, it's a case of taking steps towards getting to that quadrant. And there are many different ways of doing that. So just to recap, I would say as we assess this first quarter of the year, first month of the year in January, and effectively from January through to March, the first quarter of this year, let's take an inventory and then establish where do we want to be by the end of this year? Which of those 4 quadrants do we wish to reside in? And for example, to make the transition to an investor or business owner, that may not necessarily take place within the first year. But as we begin to put our plan together, we can make steps that will take us a lot closer to that position than we were this time last year. So once again, to recap, cash can flow to us in 4 different ways. Either that as an employee, that as a self-employed person, that as a business owner, and that as an investor. And there are various iterations of these 4 things here. But if we have that in our minds going forward, we can then determine where are we and where would we like to be. And the good news, it's possible for that to happen for everyone. And if you go through some of the previous episodes of the show, I have examples of people who have made that transition, and I will continue to present to you examples of people who have made that transition or are making that transition as well, so that we can hopefully see a little bit of ourselves in each of these examples. So until next time, stay great, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Learning for Legacy. To join our community or find out about what else we get up to, you can follow us on Twitter at Legacy Learning or on our website at www.legacylearning.co.uk. To access additional content or exclusives from this particular episode, please find the information within the show notes.